This video is a demonstration of the TI-83 calculator, the basic operations of it. What I'm actually using is a program running on a PC that emulates a TI-83, actually emulates a TI-83 Plus. For this class, you need a TI-83 or a TI-84 calculator, or any of the versions of those, 83 or 84 or a Plus or Silver edition of one of those. Statistics involves some calculations, some pretty involved calculations sometimes, and you need to use the calculator to get done with those calculations. It can be extremely complicated and error prone if you were to try to do them by hand, for example. So you need a TI-83 or 84. The other models of TI calculators, the 82, the 85, and the 89, are not suitable for use in a statistics class. All three of those calculators are missing functions that are required for this class, and so they're not suitable. Get an 83 or 84 or some variation of those. You can get them online on eBay or Craigslist or something like that pretty cheaply. Can even resell it online at the end of the semester if you didn't want to keep it. There are also apps that you can get for PCs, Macintoshes, iPads, iPhones, and even Android devices that emulate, I think, primarily TI-83 calculators, like this app that we're using here. I can't really vouch for those other than for the TI-83 one that we're using here. I know this one works, the PC version. It's called VTI, but this is an online class. I guess there's no reason why you can't use a app instead of an actual calculator, but you're going to need one of those. So this is the calculator. Again, the main buttons are down here on the bottom. All of those buttons have some primary function that's printed right there on the button. The number buttons, your basic math operations over here. Up top, there are buttons that have groups of functions behind them, like vars or stat or program or math, and we're going to be using some of those buttons up there to do some of those functions. Okay, we'll go through a little demonstration of what goes on when you press one of those buttons. But for the main functions, if you just wanted to do something simple like 5 times 2, and again, I'm just clicking the mouse on those buttons to press them, and you hit enter, and you get your answer there. So that's how you do basic math operations. You can do something longer than that. 5 times 2 divided by 4 times 6, and hit enter, and you get a different result. Okay, if you want to clear that, you can hit the clear button. Sometimes if you're in one of these menus that come up with one of these buttons from up here or something more complicated, to get back to your entry screen, you use the quit function, which is the function that's above and to the left of the mode button. Okay, so that's how you do basic operations and get to your called a home screen or your main entry screen. In addition to the math operations over here, there are some other math operations like inverse function, square root and square, logarithms and exponentials. If you want to take something to a power, that's what this button is, the up arrow. So 5 power 3, which is 5 cubed, gives you the answer there. 5 times 5 times 5. That's what this button does. It says that the next number that you enter is an exponent. There's trigonometric functions like sine, cosine, tangent. We don't use those during statistics, but they're up there. Notice that for every one of these buttons above and to the left of it, there is another function that's written in the same color as the second button. And to get to those functions, you have to hit the second button first. Okay, So I'll do a demonstration of that with the vars and the DISTR button, but just to show you what happens, if you want to get to the quit function, you have to hit second. And notice when you hit second, your cursor changes to an up arrow to indicate that you're in second selection mode. And when I hit mode, I don't get mode, I get quit. I wasn't in the middle of doing anything, so I didn't really quit out of anything. But that's how you get to those second functions. So let's do a little demonstration, and I'm going to use the vars and the DISTR functions just to give you a little idea of what goes on behind these. If I click on the vars button, and vars stands for variables, I get a screen with a bunch of options on it. Don't worry too much about what those options are. This is just a demonstration. It's just to show you how they work. And what I've got is I've got a vars menu with a bunch of options on it, and I also have a Y-vars. And they get from one menu to the other, and they navigate around these screens. You use your cursor control keys, your left, right, up, and down. Okay, so I'm on the vars menu. If I want to get to the Y-vars menu, I just hit the right arrow once, and I just jump from vars to Y-vars. And all these menus and the options on the menus wrap around. So if you hit right arrow, you just go back to the first one, and you can keep doing that. Or if you go left arrow, you can go back. So you can navigate back and forth, left and right, using these buttons here. To go up and down and pick options off the menu, you use your up and down buttons. And again, those wrap. Notice if I'm at the top and I hit up, I go down to the bottom again. That can be useful if some of these menus have multiple options that go down even below option 7, and it can be easier to get to the second set of options by going up instead of by going down, by wrapping around. So that's how you navigate around the menu. Let's look at the DISTR function. So if I hit second, again, notice I'm my up arrow up here, and hit vars, I won't get the vars functions, but I'll get the DISTR functions. DISTR stands for distributions, and that's one of the things that we use a lot in statistics. And so here's the DISTR functions. There's a menu with a bunch of distribution functions, and if I right arrow, there are some draw functions. We usually don't use the draw functions, but we use a lot of stuff on this distributions menu. Okay, and this is one that's got a whole lot of options on it. So if I up arrow, notice I've got options from 1 through 0 and then A, B, C, D, E on it. And so if there's something on the second screen, it's sometimes easier to get to it by up arrowing to the bottom than by down arrowing through all the options on the normal screen. So that's how the buttons, and again, the vars distribution, the stat and the list, the math are the ones that we use in statistics, and the y equals the stat plot even operate fairly similarly. They all pop up with some sort of menu up here where you have to navigate through the menu looking for the function that you're trying to use at that particular time. Okay, and that's how all the second keys work. So to get out of that, I'm going to quit. So I'll do second, quit, and get back to our home screen. Okay. Some of the useful second functions that you can use are the ANS function that's above this minus sign with parentheses around it down here, and the second function above the enter button, which says entry. And what those will let you do, the ANS will actually put whatever the result of your previous calculation is into a new calculation. So if you do some calculation, you want to use that answer of that as an entry, you're going to do something else with it, you can just, instead of having to type that value in, you can just use ANS and it'll put that value in there. If you want to reuse a previous entry or maybe fix something, you can hit second entry and recall previous entries. Okay, so let's do that. If I do second entry, that's my 5 power 3 that I did an example of. Let's go back one more. So I do second entry again. I get back to my 5 times 2 divided by 4 times 6 entry, which is right here. You can edit that by using your right and left arrows here. And let's just say I wanted to do times 5 instead of times 6 at the end. All I do is just navigate to that point in the screen and replace whatever was up there with a different value. If you wanted to get rid of a entry somewhere along the line there, you can hit the delete button. If I hit the delete button now, I get rid of that divide symbol. And if I wanted to stick more values in there, like if I wanted to make it like 2.2, I could do INS, which is for insert. So I do second INS, and then I could type more data values in there. I don't want to do that, but that's how you go about recalling a previous entry. Let's say you made a mistake and you wanted to fix something. You can go in and use your cursor keys and the delete and insert buttons to fix a previous entry. So if I hit the enter there, notice my answer now is 12.5. And what if I wanted to take and subtract that value from, let's say, 20, and I don't want to type it in again? So I want to do 20 and minus, and I want to subtract whatever the result of the previous calculation was. So I do second ANS, and that ANS is just going to take whatever the previous result was and stick it in there. So 20 minus 12.5 is 7.5. So that's an example of using the entry and the ANS functions to make your life a little bit easier using the calculator. Again, your primary arithmetic operations are over here: divide, multiply, subtract, and add. And notice in particular that there's two buttons that look like minus signs. There's this one over here, which on my calculator is in blue, and there's also this one down here next to the enter button, which looks kind of like a minus sign with parentheses around it. Those two buttons do two different things. This button here, the one between the multiply and add, is a subtraction operation. It expects to see a number before it and a number after it, and it will subtract those two. So if I want to do like 6 minus 2 and hit enter, I get my answer of 4. What if I did 6 minus 8 and I get a negative number minus 2, or negative 2? And notice that the negative sign in front of the negative 2 doesn't look the same as the subtraction operation. That's what this button is down here for, the one with the little minus sign inside parentheses. That's the button that you use to indicate a negative number. Okay, and it's not the same thing as a subtraction operation. It stands by itself out in front of a number and converts whatever comes behind it to a negative value. So don't get those two confused. If you get those two mixed up in the middle of a calculation, you're either going to get A, the wrong answer, or B, the calculator's going to spit an error at you. So one of the things you can look for if you do some calculation and you think you did everything right and the calculator pops an error at you is go back and check and see whether you were trying to enter a negative number but instead you used the subtraction operation, or vice versa. Using one in place of the other is always going to cause some sort of problem. At a minimum, it's going to cause your result not to be correct, and at best it's going to give you an error message that will give you an opportunity to correct. So don't get those two confused. And let's just show an example. If I wanted to take like minus 3 times 2, negative 3 times 2, I'd have to do negative 3 times 2, and there's my answer, minus 6 for that. Notice that, again, this negative sign doesn't look the same as the subtraction operation. So let's look at one particular button, the stat button and the list operations. This is a statistics class. Stat stands for statistics, and so a lot of the statistic functions that the calculator can do are behind the stat button, and so we're going to be pressing that button a lot in this class. So let's take a look at it. If I press stat, I come up with a set of menus. There's 3 menus under the stat button. List of options under the edit menu. There's a calc menu and a test menu. Under the Edit menu, there's 5 options. Edit, which is the list editor, which we'll get into in a second. You can sort a list in ascending order or descending order, clear a list, and there's an option called Setup Editor, which helps clear up problems in the list editor, and I'll show an example of how to use that in a second. Again, you navigate around these menus using your arrow keys. To get to the Calc menu, you right arrow, and there's a different list of options. We're going to be, in this particular menu, we're going to be using the options 1var stats quite a bit, and this other option number 4, linreg ax plus b. Those are the only options on the Calc menu that we use in this class. And again, if I wanted to do linreg ax plus b, whatever that function does, I would go to the Stat button, go over to the Calc menu, down to option 4 here, and hit Enter, and it would put linreg ax plus b into my entry screen. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's how you would get to that. And if you look at the Test button, there's a whole bunch of options on here also that we're going to use. And again, this is one where you notice that 7, there's a down arrow, which indicates there's even more options down there. If you go down below 7, there's a whole bunch of options, even goes higher than the DISTR one did, that are under the Stat Tests menu. Okay, so those are the 3 menus that show up under the Stat button. If you look at the list operations, I'll do second list, I get a different set of menus. The list names menu is a place where I can get the name of a list. The list ops menu gives me some of the options I've already seen on the Stat Edit menu, plus some other options. And then there's the list math options. And in particular, you can get the min, which is what's the smallest value in the list, what's the largest value in the list, what's the mean, which is the average, and so on and so forth. We'll actually do a demonstration with option 5, which is the sum, a little bit later. So that's kind of an overview of the stat and list functions. Notice that up here at the top, right below the window, there's 5 other buttons. This is a graphing calculator, and one of the things that you can do in this window is to draw graphs, and that's what these 5 buttons are all associated with it. The 5 primary functions and the second functions above them. So those 5 buttons are used primarily for manipulating the graphics that you can display, either generating the graphics or working with them with these 5 buttons. I'm not going to go into them today, but that's what those buttons are, and that's why they're up there by the graphic screens. One of the other things that you'll notice with most of the buttons down here is above it and to the right, there's another name or another option that's in the same color as this alpha button. And mostly what they are is just letters, and they're used for typing letters in, and those letters are used for naming variables and naming lists. And to get to them, again, you use the alpha button. We don't use those in statistics. There's never any reason for you to hit the alpha button and to pick one of these letters or any of the other things off of the alpha functions. And in fact, I'll show you a demonstration in a bit of how that can get you in trouble in statistics. So I wouldn't even worry about the alpha functions. If you get into a more advanced use of the calculator, that's something you might want to use, but I really wouldn't even worry about them. Just concentrate on the main functions of the buttons that are here and the second functions that are above them. Okay? But they're there. If you want to get to the things to the above and to the right of any of these buttons, you have to hit the alpha button first, kind of like the second button works. So let's do some examples. Let's look at something called the list editor. If I click the stat button, the first menu that comes up is edit, and the first entry on the first menu is the edit menu, edit option. And if I hit enter there, I get into the list editor, and that's what the screen shows up here. In a lot of statistics problems, what you have is a list of data values, and almost always if you're going to be doing something with that list of data values, the very first thing you do is enter that list of data values into the calculator. And you do that by putting them into one of the lists. So again, to get to that, you click the Stat button here and just hit Enter, because it's the first option on the first menu under Stat, and it puts you into the list editor. If you've got a list of data values and you want to enter them, 6, enter, 9, enter, 3, enter, 5, enter. I'm just pressing the value that I want to put in there, like 8, and then hitting the Enter button, and it puts it into the list. So that's how you enter data values in the list. I'll mention this in one of the later videos, but I do want to emphasize it. When you're using your calculator and putting a list of data values into it, please, after you've entered the list in your calculator, go back and double check and make sure you got it right. You can navigate through a list by going up and down like this. And so if you've got a list of 20 or 30 or 40 data values that you entered into a list, go back and double check and make sure you got the numbers in there right. If you do calculations based on that list and you've got the wrong numbers in the list, I'm not going to know that. You're just going to get the wrong answers. So it takes about 5 seconds, 10 seconds maybe, to double check a list of values. And I highly recommend you double check it. If you want to go and edit something, like you notice that, hey, this number 3 should have been a 4, you just navigate to that and you put 4, enter, and it'll change it to a 4. So it's pretty easy to edit a list. If you've got data in a list and you want to reuse that list for something else, so you want to clear that list out, the way to do it is go up to the list name and hit the clear button, and then hit Enter. And that'll wipe out all those data values that were in that list. Okay. One of the things that students sometimes do that get them into problems, and I'll demonstrate it using list 2, is if you go up into the list name and instead of hitting the clear button, you hit the delete button, what you do is, and I'll do it right now, it looks like you got rid of the list 2. It looks like list 2 disappeared. Okay. And you want to use list 2 for something. It's really not gone. What you just did was delete it off the list editor screen, and the way to get it back is to go back to the Stat button, and that's what this Setup Editor option is on the Edit menu. So you go down to option 5, hit Enter to select it, hit Enter again to run it, and it'll say Done, and you go back to Stat, Edit, and now your list 2 is back again. So that's how to, if you accidentally do go up and hit delete while you're in a list name, that's how you go get it back, is go to the Stat button and select Setup Editor and hit Enter to select it, and then hit Enter again to run it, and your list will be back. There are 6 built-in lists, 1, 2, 3, 4, L1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that's all I ever use when I'm using the calculator for statistics. You can go in and type your own list names in which case you would use the alpha functions for that, but I don't see the point in it, so I don't do it. Let's do an example of using one of the lists, and I'm going to go ahead and put some values in here into this list, and we'll show an example of doing an operation with a list. So I've got a list 1 with a bunch of values in it. I'm going to get back to my entry screen and do a quit, and I'll just clear out what's in there. And what I want to do is want to pick one of the functions off the list menu. So I'll do second list, and what I want to do is go over to the math menu and go down to the sum function and hit Enter. And so it puts sum with an open parentheses in my main input screen. And what this sum function is looking for is the name of a list, and it will add up the data values in that list. So I have to tell it which list I want to use. And if you go down here above the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you'll notice that the second function is L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, and L6. That's how you enter the names of the lists into functions like sum and some of the other things that are behind the Stat button. So I'm going to tell it to use list 1, so I do second, L1, and it puts an L1 in there. I do a close parentheses, and I hit enter, and there's if you go back and check the values that were in list 1 and add them up, they come out to 23. So that puts the total of the values in L1. One of the things that you can't do, you can't use the letter buttons to generate this L1. And I'll just show you what happens if you try to do it. Let's go back to list, math, sum, okay. And instead of using my second function above the number 1, I'm going to use the alpha buttons to put the letter L into number 1. So I'm going to do alpha L, number 1, close parentheses. Notice it doesn't look the same as the L1 that I picked from here. It's not the same thing. The calculator thinks that that's some other list or other variable or something that you named L1. If I go back and try to edit it, the calculator will let me edit each one of those. Notice that the sum, open parentheses, is all one thing to the calculator. And I can't go and individually change any of those letters. All I can do is get rid of the whole thing. But it will let me individually change the letters of the L and a 1 and a 2. And if I hit enter here, I get an error. And this is what the errors look like. There's another whole presentation about errors on the calculator, but that's one of the errors that you can get. So don't use the alpha functions. Okay. If I go back and recall my good L1 again and try to edit it, it won't even let me get to the 1. And that L1 thing there is all one piece as far as the calculator is concerned, and it's the list L1 that we use to put our data in. So don't use the alpha characters when you're trying to put a list name or something like that. It's not going to work. The other way to get the list names is to do second list, and the first option on the list, under the list button, the names thing is you can get these list names. There's another list out there called ResID that we never need to use. So that's the two ways to get a list name and tell the calculator to use it. And obviously the easiest way to do it is to use the second functions above 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all you have to do is remember which list you put your data values into. The last thing I want to show you is there are times, it doesn't happen often, where the calculator, because of something that went wrong inside of it, can get bad data and some internal variables that can cause lots of things in the calculator to not work correctly. And if that's the case, what you want to do is basically hit the master reset button on your calculator. And the way to do that is you do second and select mem down here above the plus sign. And if you're on the mem, which stands for memory, obviously, go down to option 7, reset, and select reset all RAM. And notice it puts this big warning message, resetting RAM erases all data and programs from RAM. Well, generally, you're not going to have any programs in RAM anyhow, and erasing all the data is what you want to do. You want to press the master reset button. So that's what, again, second, mem, go down to reset, select reset all RAM, and then go down and select option 2, reset. And that's like pushing the master reset. That'll wipe your calculator back to factory default settings. Okay, and you get the screen up here that says RAM was cleared, and everything that you did, like let's go back and look at our list is gone, everything's gone. Our entries are gone. The calculator's got nothing. It's back the way it was when it came out of the box. So if you're doing some calculations and you think you're doing everything correctly, but you're getting error messages and you think maybe it's because something's wrong inside the calculator, go back and do that reset all RAM and try again. If you find that you're still getting error messages after you've done that, it's probably because you're doing something wrong with the calculator, not because the calculator has got something wrong with it. So those are the basics for using the TI-83. There are a couple more videos that we're going to show some operations in calculator. But after the first couple chapters, mostly what I'm just going to show you is things that happen here in the screen. And I'm going to say, go to the stat button and select the z-test function off of the stat tests list. And what that means is you click the stat button, you go to the test menu, and you select z-test. And then I'm going to, there'll be a demonstration that shows, oh, here's the input screen, and then after you type all your data in, there'll be another one that shows here's what the result of that calculation is. And so I'm going to assume after we've done a couple of videos that you're going to know enough about using a calculator that I'm not going to have to actually walk through videos step by step doing it with you. There'll be several more videos for the first few chapters, but after that we're going to pretty much just go to showing you what I want to see on the screen, and you're going to have to I'll tell you how to get to it by pressing the buttons, but we're not necessarily going to have videos for them. So that's the basics for the TI-83 calculator. Play around with it. Look at the user's guide for it. Again, you need to have one. It's possible the author of the textbooks talks about how to do statistics without having a graphing calculator. There's nobody that does statistics like that. If you get a job or somewhere further along in your education, end up using statistics, you're going to use a TI-83 or 84 calculator for it, or possibly Microsoft Excel. And to tell you the truth, the only difference between using a TI-83 or TI-84 and Microsoft Excel is in Excel you have to type in the names of functions into a cell in a spreadsheet instead of pushing buttons on a calculator. Other than that, you have to know the names of the functions in Microsoft Excel. You have to know what the arguments are, what are the things that you have to tell it to use for a function. But for all intents and purposes, it's just like using a TI-83. The way you operate it is a little bit differently, but the functions are the same. So we're not going to use Microsoft Excel in this class. We're going to use a TI-83, but it's going to translate directly into doing the same sort of thing. In fact, if you look out on the supplemental material, there's even a PDF file in an Excel spreadsheet that talks about how to use Microsoft Excel to do the same things that the TI-83 is doing, and even has some examples, a spreadsheet with some examples for actually using them. So you need to get a TI-83 or 84 calculator for this class, and that's the basics for how to use it.